Ladies and gentlemen, we are very proud to have this webinar today of Passione Engadina, Dr. Alfredo Altavilla. Yes, of course, a good friend, but an icon for everybody in the automotive. And let me say, Alfredo, thanks, first of all, to be my guest today in this our talk, and that we will spread away all around the world. Thanks, Alfredo. And
it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure to meet with you and with all your guests around this webinar.
So let's start from the passion, from the real passion. Are you still having fun sometimes with your classic cars, or you don't have the time like the old days?
Well, time is always an incredibly precious resource. So there is never enough time to run all the cars and the motorcycles I would like to. So nothing has really changed from that standpoint. The only thing is that probably if at all possible, I can enjoy the weekend a little bit more than I was used to.
So what are you doing now in your life? Because then, of course, we will talk about cars, sure, but you end your experience with FCA after a long, long time. You're an icon of that brand. Anyway, also when you're out, lots of people think about you, but now you move to CVC, right?
Yeah, I'm a senior advisor to CVC Capital Partners. CVC is the largest private equity fund in Europe, and because of the association with them, I ended up becoming the chairman of Recordati, one of the leading Italian pharmaceutical companies, which was acquired by CVC shortly after I joined the team. And then I sit also on the board of Conceria Pasubio, who's one of the best suppliers of leather for automotive, luxury leather, and then I'm working as an advisor to a number of companies in Italy, especially in the automotive sector, which unfortunately for them want me to tell them a little bit how to strategize the future, especially weathering the storm of the coronavirus.
And let me say that if I'm not wrong, Breitling is part of CVC. We had George Kern 2 weeks ago on my webinar.
That's correct. Breitling is owned by CVC.
I think that the actual crisis of the automotive sector needs absolutely a rethinking about these CO2 fines that I will never understand why the automotive brands has accepted in the past, but it's like that. And I think that we need a breakdown about this. What do you think about this point?
Well, Paolo, probably this is the first thing that the European Commission should do to boost the automotive sector. And to be perfectly honest, they should have done something already a couple of months ago, preventing the nightmare that the automotive sector is going through right now. I don't see any chance for any of the European OEM to pay fines at the end of the year for a non-compliance with the 95 gram per kilometer CO2 threshold that was set 5 years ago. So in my view, there should be at least a 1 or even better, a 2 years waiver of those fines to be given to the European OEMs. The other reason for this is that people have no money today to purchase fancy electric cars or hybrid, which are much more expensive than traditional internal combustion engine cars. And therefore, I don't see any chance to boost the demand today to make sure that OEMs are complying with the limits. So there is a demand side of the problem and there is a regulation side of the problem. And the only way to deal with both of them simultaneously is to just delay the application of the rules.
Alfredo, how did it happen that the automotive sector has accepted this growth explosion of the, I wouldn't say partially fake, but not so clear explosion of electric cars, electromobility? We know all that Tesla is produced with nuclear power. We know all that now a good diesel is less polluting than some cars. And we have lots of information, very rational, but it's so hard to let people understand that electric was growing a little bit for other reasons that personally I don't totally understand, honestly.
Well, Paolo, it all goes back to the Dieselgate story, which has polluted the image of diesel engines forever, for no reason, because I agree with you, a Euro 6D temp diesel car today is one of the best example of low emissions that you can actually get. The problem is that it has become popular because populists and have embraced this battle of fight against internal combustion engines to try and gain votes around Europe. And unfortunately, this is a reality that nobody can actually escape at this point. There is also another reason that a lot of politicians in the European Parliament know nothing about the automotive industry. And most of them come from countries where there is not an automotive industry. And therefore, they pay no attention to employment in the automotive sector. I mean, you don't need to be a genius, and you don't need an MBA at the Harvard University to figure out that to produce an electric car, you need much less manpower than to produce an internal combustion engine. Then somebody should say, what do we do with all the people that will be left without a job because of the explosion of electric cars? Having said all of this, frankly speaking, I don't believe that electric cars will become really popular before 10 years from now. Fundamentally for two reasons. One is the need for an infrastructure widely available to support the mass motorization of electric cars. And the other reason is that there is a customer convenience issue that sooner or later people need to understand. Let me give you an example. If you need to refuel your car, petrol or diesel, it's going to take you 3 to 5 minutes, depending whether or not you're queuing beside somebody else. If you need to recharge your electric car, you need at least 20 minutes, assuming that you are so lucky to find a fast charging station on your route. 20 minutes. If you are lagging behind other two people, it's going to take you an hour to recharge your battery. And if your plane is taking off, they are not going to wait for you to recharge your battery electric car. So what do? Or let me give you another example. If your wife or your daughter went to a party at night and needs to come back home and has to recharge the battery at midnight in the middle of nowhere, everybody will know that she's going to stay there for at least 20 minutes again. What can happen in 20 minutes to a lady in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night? So this is what I call customer convenience. And at some point, we need to understand that this is something which affects the freedom with which you use your car, which has always been the first reason, the first purchase reason for a new car. Since we were children, I would say, we have always been dreaming about owning a car because we wanted to be free. And so nobody is really willing to compromise on personal freedom. And that's why I don't believe that we're going to witness any massive shift to battery electric vehicles before a number of years.
One question, I totally agree with your answer. I just wrote an economic issue that says 2.5 million of unemployees from these kind of automotive brands and industries with electric cars. 2.5 million of unemployment. So somebody has to talk about this. I'm totally agree. But let me go back to one other point. When you think about electric, why not the hybrid? This is something that I don't totally understand. I mean, we could drive in a motorway using a diesel engine consuming 1-2 liters per 100 kilometers, enter into the center of the city, we switch to hybrid, and when we get out, we recharge. Why is not working so much?
Hybrids are the perfect answer to both problems. The lowering the CO2 emissions, still maintaining a decent customer convenience. The problem is that on one end, hybrids are more expensive than traditional cars, and therefore, unless there is a clear advantage for a customer to buy an hybrid, I'll give you an example. If city centers will be available for hybrid cars and restricted totally to internal combustion engine cars, then this is a reason why somebody should buy an hybrid instead of a traditional ICE car. Or another reason could be if hybrid cars pay less tax, registration tax and yearly taxes than ICE cars, then you are offering a customer one more reason to shift to hybrid cars. Then we know very well that there are multiple kinds of hybrids, from mild hybrids all the way up to plug-ins, with different price points and with different performances. I agree with you conceptually, nobody needs more than 20 miles in electric mode in a traditional city journey. So probably even a plug-in would be too much. This is my view and my driving experience. The flip side of an hybrid car is, of course, weight, because especially if you go for a plug-in hybrid, then the weight difference from with a traditional ICE car is material. And weight means that when you're driving with internal combustion engine, your consumption will be higher, and sometimes much higher than the one that you would experience with a traditional ICE engine. So hybrids have pros and cons. On my side, battery electric vehicles have only cons. Hybrids have pros and cons, and certainly I'm much more inclined to think that 10 years from now, we can see probably 60% of new car registrations being hybrids, 20% being traditional ICE engine, and only 20% being battery electric vehicles. So I have no doubt in my mind, hybrids are the future.
Do you think that, if you think back to your career in FCA, so I will never make bad questions, of course. We are friends, so I totally respect also the policy. I don't misunderstand it. But do you think that, honestly, FCA has been a little bit delayed in understanding the future of mobility? Because many people say that Dr. Passione didn't believe in electric cars.
No, Paolo, I wouldn't say so. I think that FCA did not spend unnecessarily money too early in the plan. One could probably question the fact that we should have been devoting more money to advanced engineering on battery electric vehicles, but you also need to take into account the fact that US has always been much less demanding than Europe from an electrification standpoint, and therefore the capital allocation every year was going primarily to refresh and update and develop new products, primarily for the U.S. market, which has always been the bulk of the profits of the company, and less to the electrification of engines and transmissions. So probably that could have been done a little bit different. but I wouldn't say that we were completely wrong, because you see today that OEMs which have been throwing tons of money into electric cars are now facing the reality of a business model that just does not stand up.
And let's go back to electric. What did you think? Because at the end of the story, we are, sorry to say, petrol guy. I mean, when we talk about an Alfa Romeo 33...
I don't feel sorry for that.
Me too, absolutely. But you know that sometimes we are not more politically correct in a way. But let me go. I had the chance to do a focus group with a group of teens, 16, 20 years old, for BMW. Not so long ago. And maybe you know that the payoff of BMW at that time was Freude am Fahren, the pleasure of driving. And there was a young guy, I can remember the rest of my life, try to imagine, 17 years old, raise the hands and say, sorry, Paolo, I would like to ask you, what do you mean for the pleasure of driving? I say, sorry, can you explain better? And these young guys told me, jam, I don't find a parking. If I drink a half of a beer, I go to jail, I lose my driver's license. Polluting. My father is always angry because we are waiting on the jam on the motorway. I wanted to understand what you mean. So how do you think will be the next generations around cars? Just a commodities to rent, to take in a railway station and then go to a place, or the same passion that we had and we still have?
No, Paolo, I think that the vast majority of young drivers will never feel the same level of enthusiasm and passion for cars that our generation has been experiencing. But for a very simple reason, an hybrid car or a BEV don't have much to say when it comes to pleasure of driving. If you're driving a tank which weighs 2,000 kilos, to be perfectly honest, how the hell is it possible to have fun driving that car? I usually laugh at people who tell me, hey, you know what, I have a Tesla, I can go from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 2.3 seconds. And then what? Once you do this once, twice, 3 times, what have you achieved? I think the pleasure of driving is not going from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. The pleasure of driving is doing a corner as fast as you can, maybe oversteering your car. This is what comes to my mind when we talk about pleasure of driving. And to be perfectly honest, I don't see a Tesla oversteering on a nice road on the Alps or on the hills surrounding my place. So.
You were part, deeply soulful part of the rebirth of Giulia and Stelvio, the birth and the rebirth of the name of Giulia. And if we see now the reaction worldwide of the Giulia GTA, GTAM, the reaction, the tons of millions of followers, this tells us that all these cars, when you say, sorry to say these bad words, but when you look to a Mercedes Class C, E, and S, or a BMW 357, they're all the same. It seems that they just get some hormonal approach on the design of the car. And it means that there is still a space, there is a still place for these cars that bring some emotions.
Paolo, now that I'm no longer working in the automotive industry, I can tell you, yes, there is a space for a bunch of idiots like us that are ready to buy those cars. If I were still the CEO of FCA in EMEA, then probably my answer would have been different, because unfortunately there are not enough people to support the investment that is required to do a nice car like the Giulia GTA, GTAM. The problem today in the automotive industry is that the level of investment that are needed to develop a new car is so high that unless you have a clear demand out there, your business case is going to be heavily questionable, and this is not good for the kind of cars that we like.
Alfredo, if you can tell me, of course, and if this question is not good, you tell me, Paolo, I don't like it. Why it's so hard to rebirth Alfa Romeo?
Because, Paolo, revamping a brand needs consistency. Once you start the journey, you need to walk a step after the other, but you cannot walk 2 steps, then stop, wait for a year or 2, and then do 1 more step. You got to be consistent in time and provide the sequence of products with the same sequence in time that your German competitors are using. Otherwise, you are always half pregnant. And this is issue number 1. Issue number 2 deals with customer experience. Although I think that there have been tremendous progress in the way in which Alfa Romeo is handling customer experience, still there is a gap with some of the German competitors that needs to be filled. And customers of an 80,000, 60,000, 80,000 euro car are incredibly demanding people. And so you gotta cope with this kind of attitude professionally. Otherwise, you pay a price that maybe they buy your car once, but they don't buy the same brand again. So again, it's a matter of consistency.
Can you remember, please, how much on the total income of FCA per year comes from US and how much from Europe? Is it right, 80-20?
No, the 80-20 share is was the allocation of profits that was coming from US and Europe back in 2018. In 2019, I don't have a precise number in my head because I was not there.
Okay. The question was in direction of, is it right to think that when we talk about FCA in general, it's more an American company than a European company?
No, that is not true. Although I understand that there is this general feeling out there, the reality is that at least as long as I've been there, any capital allocation decision was always made on the merits of the business case that was put forward. And to the extent a project was delivering an interesting return on that capital in Europe, in Brazil, or in China, you could gain approval at the expenses of a US-based project. Clearly, the one thing that we got to bear in mind is that the real difference between the American market and the European market is the price-cost comparison. A pickup truck is much less costly than a European D-segment sedan. Because a pickup truck is still with a cab on top and a big engine underneath the hood. There is not the same kind of sophistication that you have on on European cars, and most of those pickups are built in Mexico, which is probably, actually not probably for sure, the best possible manufacturing location available in the world for cars and pickups. And therefore, once you price a pickup truck at $50,000, $60,000, you make tons of money on each of them. Europe is a much more expensive place to manufacture cars, and as I was saying, European cars are much more complex from a technology standpoint, and therefore the margins on European cars are lower than the ones that you can get in the US, which makes the whole difference in evaluating the return on an investment.
So now we go to the end and we start having fun. So Formula E or Formula One? Be careful in answering because all the boards of Julius Baer is watching you, and our common friends Marco Paroni absolutely is there in front of you. So what do you think about Formula E against Formula One?
It's the same difference that I see from an inflatable doll and Naomi Campbell.
Marco Paroni will be very happy. The car of your dreams, the car that you really would like to have in your collection about classic cars, of course.
Ferrari 250 short wheelbase.
Good cars. And tell me something about the Alfa Romeo 33 Stradale.
It could come second.
Okay. And what do you think about the decision Vettel, Ferrari, Sainz?
Well, Carlos Sainz is a very good driver. Is very solid, and I'm sure that it will continue bringing home a lot of points, which is exactly what you need from the number 2 driver at Ferrari. You need that this guy brings home a lot of points for the Constructor Championship, and you need that this guy does not crash into the number 1 driver, as it happened in the past, unfortunately. So I think that Carlos is the right answer. Was he the only answer available in the market? I don't know. To be honest, I had actually a dream more than anything else. I would have liked to see Antonio Giovinazzi on the Ferrari as second driver, because I believe that Leclerc with Giovinazzi would have been a dream team for a number of years to come for Ferrari. But having said this, I believe that Carlos Sainz is a very good answer.
Let's go back to the last question, and I keep it as a last because I don't want to put you in any kind of embrace, not at all. But how do you miss a genius like Dr. Marchionne?
A lot. Let me tell you. I had this conversation with a friend of mine a few weeks ago. If Sergio was still with us, we would have had a lot of fun in those weeks strategizing about some bold strategic move to do to be ready for the next upturn in the automotive sector. Never forget that the Chrysler deal was decided in October of 2008, less than 2 months after the Lehman Brothers crash. And I remember the first time I walked into Sergio's office with the idea of why don't we take over a stake in Chrysler. His reaction was, "Are you drunk?" And then he threw me out of the office. He called me back the day after and said, "Come to me. We need to have lunch together and discuss this crazy idea." And we started from there. So I'm sure that those kind of emergency situations were the ones where Sergio was showing a different standing from a leadership standpoint compared to his peers in the industry. So it would have been really nice to do one more round of roller coaster with him.
You make the final study of your degrees about Fiat, right?
Yeah.
And how many years have you been in FCA or Fiat, call whatever? How many?
28.
That's why I'm honored of your friendship, because it doesn't happen very often that such a high manager, top level like you, when decided to get out from FCA, has decided also to cut with the love of his life, to go in a new way on a new sector, respecting like a gentleman a certain way of being in the business. That's why I'm honored to be your friend. And this is why I want to close this webinar with you, that the people knows that we still have gentlemen in this world. You are one of these.
Thank you very much.